Before we dive into this wild ride, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I love hearing just how far these Karen tales of chaos and karma can travel. The air seemed to split in half with the sound. A wet, pressurized blast tore from the charger on my garage wall, launching a violent spray of neon paint in every direction. Droplets caught the sunlight, glinting like shards of stained glass. Blue, pink, and green mist swallowed the driveway in a cloud so thick it looked like smoke from an explosion. And at the center of it all stood Julie and Lily, both frozen in shock, their mouths open, their designer blazers drenched, hair streaked with dripping colors. Julie shrieked first, clutching at her ruined clipboard as if that would save her. Lily staggered back, wiping paint from her eyes with hands that only smeared it further across her face. My white garage door now looked like a street mural, but I wasn't angry. I stood there with my coffee cup and the faintest smirk, because this moment had been building for weeks, and the sisters had brought it on themselves. Rewind. A few weeks earlier, my driveway was quiet, ordinary, just the way I liked it. I'm 38, not old, not young, but old enough to have earned some peace after years of grinding. My Tesla charger, mounted neatly to the side of my garage, was my little lifeline. I drove a lot for work, and keeping my car charged was as basic a need as keeping food in the fridge. Every morning, I'd plug in, grab my coffee, and let the day start calm. But nothing stays calm for long when you live under the thumb of an HOA. And certainly not when Julie and Lily, the self-appointed enforcers of our neighborhood, got involved. They were sisters, both 35, both with a kind of smug confidence that comes from believing they own every patch of pavement within sight. Julie was the loud one, always carrying a clipboard, always citing rules that no one else had ever heard of. Lily was quieter, but sharper. She had that smirk that made every word sound like a personal insult. Together, they were a storm no one asked for. The first real clash happened on a Thursday afternoon. I pulled into my driveway after work and froze when I saw them. Julie stood by my charger, fiddling with something metallic. Lily hovered nearby, watching, arms crossed. I stepped out of my car slowly, taking in the sight. A shiny padlock clamped onto my charging port. "Excuse me," I said, already feeling my pulse climb. "What do you think you're doing?" Julie turned, all fake sweetness, her orange blazer catching the sun like a warning flare. "Oh, hi. Don't worry. We're just securing this. There's been misuse of community electricity. As HOA officers, it's our duty to prevent that." "Community electricity?" I walked closer, squinting at the lock. "This is my garage. My charger. My bill." Lily chuckled softly, adjusting the cuff of her blazer. "That's not what we've been told. We've had reports that you've been siphoning power illegally from the neighborhood grid. Very serious violation." I actually laughed. "Reports? From who?" "You too." Julie's face hardened. "We don't make the rules. We enforce them. And if you're not misusing this, then you shouldn't mind a lock until we can confirm." My jaw clenched, so hard it hurt. They had literally put a lock on my own property, on the device I used every single day, and were talking like it was some kind of favor. "Take it off. Now." Julie tilted her head, lips curving into the kind of smile you give a child. "Oh no, that wouldn't be responsible. The board will review the matter next month." "Next month?" I barked. "You expect me to go without a charger for weeks because you invented some violation?" Lily stepped forward then, her voice low, cutting. "We expect you to cooperate with the HOA, unless you want fines stacked against you." The word fines dropped like a weight. I could feel heat rising in my neck. This wasn't about rules. It wasn't about electricity. It was about power. About two women who had decided my driveway was their stage and I was their victim. I took a step closer, keeping my voice steady. "You don't get to come onto my property and lock my equipment. That's trespassing." Julie's eyes glittered. "Call it what you want. The lock stays. Unless, of course, you'd prefer we escalate this to legal action." The arrogance in her tone made my fingers curl into fists. I wanted to rip the lock off right then, to shout loud enough that every neighbor heard, but something in Lily's smirk stopped me. That look said they were waiting for me to snap, waiting for me to become the angry man they could paint as dangerous. So I forced myself to breathe. "Fine," I muttered. "Do what you want. But this isn't over." Julie gave me a little nod, like she just wanted debate. "Good. Glad to see you're being reasonable." They walked off down the driveway, heels clicking against the concrete, leaving the gleaming padlock behind like a signature. I stood there, staring at it, fury buzzing in my chest. My Charger, my garage, my house. And somehow, in the twisted logic of HOA politics, they had convinced themselves they owned it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the driveway under the porch light. The lock caught the glow, a small, infuriating reminder that my space was no longer mine. I thought about calling the HOA board, about filing complaints, but I already knew how it would go. Julie and Lily had connections, leverage, that smug charm that bent rules in their favor. They'd spin whatever story they wanted, and I'd be left powerless. And that's when the thought first sparked. A quiet, dangerous thought. If they wanted to play games, I could play too. But I wouldn't just complain. I wouldn't just fight back. I'd make them regret ever stepping onto my driveway. The plan hadn't formed yet, not fully. But the anger was fuel, and fuel always burns. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dark silhouette of the Charger through the window. In the stillness of the night, I could almost hear the faint tick of the lock, like it was taunting me. My jaw tightened, and I whispered to no one, "You made a mistake." And with that, the war had begun. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, let me tell you, one of my absolute favorite stories I've ever shared is linked in the description and on the end screen. It's called "Karen Said People Like You Shouldn't Sit in First Class. Didn't Know I Was the Air Marshal on Board." If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it, because that one was pure karma at 30,000 feet. The morning after the lock appeared, I took the predictable route. I drafted a calm email to the HOA board, carefully laying out the facts. Julie and Lily had trespassed on my property, tampered with my Charger, and slapped on a lock without permission. I attached photos of the device, of the padlock gleaming against the metal casing. I even softened my tone, hoping logic would speak louder than frustration. For a moment, I let myself believe reason might prevail. By afternoon, I had my answer. The board responded in 2 clipped sentences. "We've reviewed the concern. At this time, we defer to the decision of HOA officers Julie and Lily until further investigation." It was like a slap to the face. Not only had they ignored me, but they'd handed those 2 women full authority over my own equipment. The message between the lines was clear. They were untouchable. That evening, I saw the sisters again. Their Teslas were parked side by side in Julie's driveway across the street, identical polish machines reflecting the orange sunset. I watched as they leaned against the hood of one car, laughing. Julie held her clipboard, gesturing toward my house as Lily sipped from a metal water bottle. They knew I complained. They knew they'd won the first round. I clenched my fists until my knuckles ached. I tried diplomacy. Now, I would see how far they were willing to push. 2 nights later, I found out. I came home late, headlights sweeping across my driveway, and froze. A long black cable snaked from my garage wall across the concrete. At the other end sat Julie's Tesla, plugged directly into my Charger. She had unlocked it somehow, bypassed whatever security I thought I had left, and was draining my power like it was hers to take. I slammed the car door and stormed forward. Julie appeared from the shadows, Lily just behind her, both wearing smug smiles that made my blood run hot. "Evening," Julie said, as if we were neighbors making small talk. "Hope you don't mind. Our grid access has been unreliable lately. Just borrowing a little juice." "Borrowing?" I barked. "You broke into my Charger." Lily raised an eyebrow, casual, unbothered. "Funny. We're HOA officers. Can't really break into something we're authorized to regulate." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "It's not yours. You don't touch it again." Julie tilted her head, almost pitying. "Careful. This kind of hostility can be reported. Aggressive male behavior toward female neighbors. It doesn't look good on record." For a second, I couldn't breathe. They weren't just stealing from me. They were threatening me, twisting the narrative before I could defend myself. Any argument, any shout would be used against me. I forced myself to step back, hands raised. Unplug it. Now. Julie's smile widened. She unplugged the cable slowly, theatrically, like she was doing me a favor. Lily chuckled, shaking her head as if I were the unreasonable one. They drove off minutes later, leaving me standing in the dark, my charger cable lying limp against the driveway. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my garage with the lights on, staring at the charger like it was both a weapon and a wound. They had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Julie's smug face, Lily's smirk. They weren't going to stop. They were daring me to react, baiting me to explode so they could play the victims. And that's when the idea sharpened into something real. If I couldn't win by arguing, I'd win by outsmarting. I pulled out my old toolkit, the one that had been gathering dust since college, when I used to spend nights dismantling gadgets just to see how they worked. I dragged the box onto the garage floor, tools clattering against concrete. A plan started forming in my head, not perfect yet, but growing with every beat of anger in my chest. First, I studied the charger itself. Sleek, efficient, too trusting of anyone who plugged into it. I unscrewed the casing, exposing its veins of wiring and circuits. My hands moved carefully, methodically, the same way they had when I was younger, fixing radios and game consoles. I didn't need to destroy it. I needed to modify it. Something that looked harmless until the exact right moment. My mind raced through possibilities. Electricity? Too dangerous, too criminal. Water? Too weak, too easy to shrug off. But then my eyes landed on the corner of the garage where old paint cans were stacked. Relics of home projects. Bright colors, half full, still liquid. And just like that, the trap clicked into place. I rigged a compressed canister, fitted with tubing that could release on command. I wired it into the charger's trigger system so that instead of sending power, it would release pressure, blasting whatever was inside outward. The more I tested it, the more perfect it became. When someone tried to charge without authorization, they wouldn't just fail. They'd pay for it in the most humiliating way imaginable. I worked deep into the night, sweat running down my forehead, garage filling with the metallic tang of tools and the faint chemical sting of open paint. Each adjustment brought me closer to the image I couldn't shake. Julie and Lily, their expensive blazers dripping, their arrogance washed off in neon streaks. By dawn, the rig was complete. The charger looked normal, untouched, but beneath the casing, it had transformed into a loaded trap waiting for the right hands to set it off. I stood in the driveway, exhausted but wired with adrenaline, sipping from a stale cup of coffee. The morning sun glinted off the lock, still hanging uselessly at the side of the charger. For once I smiled at it. Let them come. Let them try. And I didn't have to wait long. That same afternoon, I saw Julie pacing across her driveway, phone pressed to her ear, eyes darting toward my house. Lily sat in her Tesla with the door open, legs crossed, tapping her nails against the steering wheel. They were restless, impatient, the kind of impatience that only grows when entitlement festers. I knew it was only a matter of time before curiosity or arrogance, or both, brought them back to my charger. And when they did, everything would change. That night, I left the garage light on, not as an invitation, but as bait, a silent dare. My trap was set, and I was ready to watch it spring. It happened on a Saturday morning, the kind of morning when the neighborhood usually smelled like fresh coffee and cut grass. I was leaning casually against the side of my garage, coffee cup in hand, watching the street as if nothing were unusual. My garage door was open, the charger visible, quiet, waiting. The sun was sharp, the sky a clean blue, and the air carried that stillness right before storm. Julie and Lily came striding across the street like they owned it. Julie in her signature orange blazer, clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. Lily in tailored slacks and a fitted jacket, her phone in hand. Their Teslas gleamed behind them, polished white machines that seemed to mirror their arrogance. Julie's eyes flicked to me, then to the charger, a smile spreading across her face that wasn't friendly. "Thought we'd help ourselves again," she said brightly, as though asking to borrow a cup of sugar. "Since you weren't using it." Lily smirked, adding under her breath, "No sense letting it go to waste." I didn't move, didn't protest. I just took a slow sip of coffee, letting silence stretch until it turned uncomfortable. That hesitation, that lack of resistance, it was the bait, and they swallowed it whole. Julie marched right up to the charger, yanked the cable, and shoved it into her Tesla's port. Lily leaned in to watch, her laughter bubbling up in anticipation of my anger. And then the trap detonated. The hiss of compressed air split the calm morning like a gunshot. A second later, an eruption of neon paint blasted from the charger with violent force, a jet of color exploding outward. Blue and pink mist collided in the air, showering them in liquid chaos. Green splattered across Julie's blazer, yellow streaked down Lily's face, dripping into her hair and staining her collar. They screamed, stumbling back, hands flailing. Julie dropped her clipboard, which landed with a wet slap on the driveway, pages instantly soaked into a rainbow mess. Lily wiped furiously at her eyes, but every swipe smeared the paint deeper across her cheeks. The neat professionalism they wore like armor evaporated in seconds, replaced by chaos, humiliation, and color. The sound carried. Neighbors stepped outside, curious heads turning. Doors opened, cameras lifted. Phones angled toward the scene as the sisters shrieked in outrage, neon paint dripping off their clothes in fat streaks that hit the concrete with audible splats. Julie rounded on me, her face half blue, half pink, hair plastered against her skin. You sabotaged this," she screamed, her voice cracking with fury. I sipped my coffee calm. "Looks like you triggered it yourselves. Maybe you shouldn't mess with things that don't belong to you." Lily's jaw dropped, her hands shaking with rage. "This is vandalism. Assault. We'll sue." Her threat was drowned out by laughter. Neighbors weren't just watching now. They were recording, chuckling, whispering. Someone even clapped. The sisters froze, realizing too late that this wasn't a private spat. This was a spectacle. And then, like a scene from a courtroom drama, the HOA president himself came marching down the sidewalk, red tie flapping in the breeze, face stern. He stopped dead at the sight. 2 HOA officers drenched in neon, dripping onto my driveway while I stood untouched, sipping coffee. "What in God's name is going on here?" he demanded. Julie tried to salvage control, waving her stained arms. He attacked us. He wired his charger to explode. But the president wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the lock still dangling from a charger, at the puddle of neon pooling beneath their heels, at the dozens of phones recording every second. His lips pressed into a hard line. "Enough," he said, voice cold. "I've had complaints for weeks about you 2 harassing homeowners. And now this? On camera." He pointed at the nearest phone, where someone was openly streaming the chaos live. "You broke into his property. You used his charger. This isn't regulation. This is trespassing." Julie stammered, eyes wild. "No, it's not. We're officers. We were authorized." The president cut her off. Authorized to what? To steal? To vandalize? His gaze swept the gathering crowd. "This is the last straw." Lily's shoulders collapsed. Her smirk was gone, replaced with the pale look of someone realizing the ground had vanished beneath them. Julie still sputtered, rage trembling in her paint-stained hands, but no words came out coherent. The crowd's laughter shifted into murmurs of agreement, satisfaction. Neighbors who had been silent victims of the sisters' bullying were watching justice bloom in real time, neon bright and undeniable. The president's voice dropped into finality. "Effective immediately, both of you are stripped of your HOA positions. Fines will be issued for trespass and damage, and you'll be covering the cost of repairs here." Julie's scream was half rage, half despair, but no one rushed to her defense. Lily just closed her eyes, paint dripping off her chin. I finally pushed off the wall, walking past them slowly. I crouched to pick up the ruined clipboard, its pages dripping with neon. I held it up, tilted my head. "Guess this one's useless now." With a flick, I dropped it back into the puddle. Neighbors laughed again. Phones captured every angle. The sisters stood humiliated, paint soaking into their expensive clothes, stripped of their power and their titles. Their Teslas, still parked awkwardly nearby, looked absurd. Sleek luxury machines tethered to the memory of a botched theft, their owners glowing like clowns in a circus act. I turned back toward my garage, finally taking a long sip of coffee. "You know," I said casually, loud enough for them to hear, "I was worried about how to keep people from misusing my charger. Turns out it fixed itself." The crowd chuckled. Someone whistled. The sisters stood frozen, caught between rage and humiliation, their downfall complete, but their shame only just beginning. As I stepped into my garage, I could still hear Julie's sputtering, her voice breaking, the frantic shuffle of Lily trying to wipe paint from her eyes. But the laughter of the neighbors drowned it out, steady, undeniable, the sound of justice settling into place. For the first time in weeks, the lock on my charger didn't look like a threat. It looked like a trophy. And, as the garage door began to close, sealing me off from the chaos outside, I smiled to myself. I hadn't just won. I had ended them on their own stage, in their own game, with the entire neighborhood as witness. The sisters thought they could lock me out of my own home. Instead, I locked them out of their power. And I knew this wasn't just over. It was finished. And just like that, the so-called queens of the HOA were left dripping in neon paint, their perfect image shattered in front of the entire neighborhood. My garage was mine again, my charger free, and for once, the balance of power had tipped in favor of the little guy who refused to be pushed around. Justice didn't come in the form of paperwork or fines. It came in a spray of colors they'll never forget. If you enjoyed this story of karma served fresh, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and share it with friends who'd love seeing Karens finally get what's coming to them. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more wild stories of justice, revenge, and neighborhood drama. You won't want to miss what's coming next.